Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and of course, we've got another episode of Rudy's Common Sense. This episode is going to deal with something that has troubled me, I'd say now for 3 or 4 months. Probably almost from the beginning, but it didn't set in until 3 or 4 months. We've spent a lot of time looking at the different policies of the Biden administration, the failures, of which there have been many, the crises and disasters and the deaths of people that shouldn't have died because of his incompetence. And we've asked the question, is it part of an overall plan or scheme, or is it just different plans and schemes? We dealt with that in the last podcast. This is a somewhat different view, and try to move it out of ideology, even move it out of competence, incompetence, but I guess it does involve that. And here's the thing that I've observed, and I'm going to try to show it to you, and I'm going to ask you to communicate with me on rudyscommonsense.com if you have observations about this, because this is a bit of a work in progress. We've gone from crisis to crisis. I don't think anybody can deny that. I find it impossible to locate a time in history, certainly at the beginning of a presidency, when there have been many such serious crises all at once. We've had bigger ones. We've had wars. Lincoln walked into a civil war, right? We had a world wars for Wilson and Roosevelt. We had the Cold War for Ronald Reagan. We had missile competition for John Kennedy that led eventually to the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cuba debacle. We had the Vietnam War. We've had many crises. We had the Iran hostage crisis solved in a moment by Ronald Reagan. We had the Cold War play itself out in the 1980s with times in which it looked like there might be confrontation. But I've never seen a period with this much crisis. It began with 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then 5. But here's the point of today's exercise. None of them get solved. None of them get reduced. I'm not even sure they're addressed. What's that all about? So maybe the title of this episode is, what's that all about? What are they doing? I mean, let's assume a couple of things. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Joe Biden is mentally impaired. Not a bad assumption, right? And let's assume that there's a certain bias here toward changing our form of government, toward making it a socialist economy, a top-down command economy. And many of the things we see and have shown you, I think, show they want to make it a very different kind of legal structure, without the separation of powers, without states' rights, without an electoral college, without this and that and the other thing. But how can they make so many incompetent decisions? And then how is it that they can't improve anything? What is it, a question of the people hired as well? So let's look at it first, and then we can go back and briefly see what the conclusions are, for which I'm not going to just dictate them to you. You're going to have to help me with them. The biggest one that probably, I'm not sure maybe it is the most important. It certainly overshadows everything, and we've listed some of them here. I haven't listed all of them. I don't have space or time. The one we began with almost on day one was the border, right? And the border began during the campaign, and the many promises of both the Democratic candidates, including Biden, the Democratic opinion makers, including AOC, and then eventually adopted by Biden and Harris themselves. So during the campaign, you can sum up the campaign as inviting people to come over our border illegally. To see it as anything other would be, my goodness, entirely naive, right? When you say to people, the people who are here illegally are all going to be made legal and citizens. The people who are here illegally are going to share in welfare, and they're going to get even COVID money, which they did. The people that are here illegally are going to be treated, just like everybody else. And then you say we are going to add to that, which Biden did and his party, health insurance or health care. And then now, over a period of time, free education. People, of course, would flock to the borders. You unless you are a totally mindless individual, you would know that saying that would create that increase in an invasion of our border that the president at the time and the prior president had just gotten control of. He had put his pieces in place. He never got exactly what he wanted. But despite that, President Trump was enormously adept at being able to get to conclusions, even though he didn't get all that he wanted and had tremendous opposition. And one of those was about as good control over our border in the year leading up to the pandemic as we ever had. And we'll show that to you in a moment to contrast it. But the movement toward the border, let's call it the invasion of the United States, began not on January 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. We start to see the numbers then. It began back in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and then other parts of the world during the 2020 presidential campaign, and probably even before that, with the expectation that a open border administration was going to be elected in Washington, and not just an open border administration, but one that was going to be a big time on giveaway programs. So immediately, the border smashed open. The numbers went up. We'll show you in a moment a chart comparing the first 6 months of Biden and the first 6 months of Trump. If you have any possible doubt that this is caused entirely, absolutely, and completely by Joe Biden and his political party. I accomplished a lot in 2020 exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. So Biden now has this problem. What's he going to do about it? I mean, problems happen to all presidents. The question becomes, do you solve them? Well, first, here's the chart I mentioned to you. Let me hold it up this way, but we'll put it on your screen. Here's the chart that we're talking about. And if you look at it carefully, you'll see that we're comparing November through September of the first 9 months. Really, we go back before that, 12 months, but really the first 9 months of the Trump administration, the Biden administration. So, I mean, Biden starts from a higher point, Reagan from Trump from a lower point. But let's say that's their start. That's what they were given. That's the problem they were handed. Trump immediately takes the problem down. And by March, he's got it down to what appears to be maybe less than 100,000. If this chart is correct, maybe less than 25,000. If this chart is correct. And he goes through September and he's gotten it down way below what was given to him. Now, if I went on with the entire administration, you'd see a bump way up, and then you'd see in the last 2 years a significant decline when he introduced and negotiated the in Mexico policy, where the asylees were kept in Mexico rather than brought over the border and had their asylum status adjudicated there. That is a self-created crisis. Biden reversed that. I believe it was one of his many, possibly even illegal, mandated policies. Part of his government by mandate, government by dictate, government just by president. Let's make believe there's no Congress. Would I say it was his worst mistake? Gosh, who knows? Afghanistan, maybe. But one of the most catastrophic mistakes, Trump made no such mistake, so Trump went in this direction, and look what happens. Immediately, whoa, that's like a rocket going to the sky. These are all the people waiting for the suckers to take over again. When is dumb America going to come back and give us everything we want and let us come in and not even worry if we have COVID, if we're criminals, if we're sexual perverts, if we traffic in women, or, as many of them do, bring in fentanyl. Where do you think it comes from? And now we have the rest of what we see on this graph, which we're going to point out, is it's worse now than he was first alerted to the problem. It's worse, much worse now since Kamala Harris took over. Or did she? It's astounding that she's been to the border once to the wrong place, and he's never been. Possibly in his entire career. He gets cagey about that. But we are talking about numbers that are historic numbers. So when they say that Trump caused this problem for them, that's total ridiculous. They caused this problem right here and back here with encouraging people to come. Trump had actually gotten it under control. And then Harris was put in charge, and each month got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes Bidensville. You remember Bidensville just a few months ago. Del Rio, Texas. 130,000 people altogether coming over from way, way south, coming over from, again, the triangle of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. But now We see people from Africa. We see people from Asia. We see people from terrorist countries. We see people from all over the world coming in over that border. And they find a nice open spot and a quiet spot called Del Rio. And in a short period of time, they come over in mass amount. Even though it took them a month and a half to get there, and any reasonable deployment of intelligence or concentration on this problem would have located them and stopped them long before they ever got to our border. Which means that between the time they were first alerted to the problem and the time we got to Bidensville, they not only didn't do anything about the problem, as you can see, their concentrated efforts on the problem, this is extraordinary. Their concentrated efforts on the problem made it worse, which means it might have been better if they did nothing. They're doing the wrong things. What this chart indicates is they're making the problem worse. And Bidensville, just like the border didn't get solved, because a theme that runs through this administration is they do not solve problems. They actually make them worse. So Bidensville appears to have a solution. They clean everybody out. But now we know what they merely did is they put them in private planes and flew them all over America. Maybe 30,000 of them here in the New York area, maybe more. That's about the number for White Plains Airport, equal number in Newark Airport. Those hundreds of thousands of people have been distributed in your community. It should be noted that the vast majority of them have not been tested for COVID, vaccinated for COVID. Pretty soon you're going to go to jail if you don't do it, right? In a business of 100 or more, you have to do it or you get fired, according to, I almost hesitate to call him the president because he's acting more like something else. But they are spreading it all over the country. So it does raise for intelligent human beings with common sense and fairness the question, do they really believe in COVID if they're sending hundreds of thousands of people around the country not tested for COVID, not treated for COVID, highly susceptible to it, and estimated to at least be about 30% infected. In addition to the fact they come from the third world and from Africa and elsewhere, and who knows what else they are spreading. We're just talking about illness now. How much equity do you have in your home? 50,000, 100,000, more? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance foreign and domestic criminals will come after you. Title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes. Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is alerting homeowners they could already be a victim and not know it. Here's how it goes down. First, cyber thieves search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. Next, they pull your home's title that's online. They forge your signature stating you sold your home, and they take out loans using your equity. You're not covered by insurance, your bank, or common identity theft programs. Protect your most valuable asset. Register your address now to see if you're already a victim and receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value free. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. That's HomeTitleLock.com. Well, so even with Bidensville, we don't learn the lesson of Bidensville. All we do is we make it worse, and we spread it out all across the country. If we're spreading COVID, we're spreading COVID. Since these people were only vetted very, very quickly, or if at all, no one is saying they're all bad people. I'm going to give you an assumption. I'm going to say that 10% of them are bad people. And I think that's very conservative. and I don't include the COVID people, about 30% of COVID. I include in the bad people, the people bringing in fentanyl. I say that number is high because record number of deaths this year from fentanyl, directly connected to Biden's open border. Those additional deaths, just like the deaths in Afghanistan, are on his hands. They don't have to happen. Fentanyl comes from China to the drug cartels in Mexico. They share the money, and it comes over to the United States in being carried by mules because, as you should know, been explained before, the border, although not patrolled by the United States or Mexico, is patrolled by the drug cartels, who are the gatekeepers. They let you in or not, and they let you in for a price. That price can be cash, that price can be women, that price can be little children, that price can be carrying fentanyl, or that price can be hiding drug dealers, murderers, or some of the terrorists they're bringing in for their partners, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Islamic terrorist groups you wouldn't know the name of. That partnership is over a decade old. Now, this problem, which only a fool or an anarchist would avoid, is worse today, not only than it was before Trump left, much worse, but it's gotten worse all through the Biden administration. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse, which leads you to the conclusion that they don't know what they're doing, or they do know what they're doing, and they want this. So if we come up to today meaning about November 15th, there were recently, this is a test case here, 1,000 migrants that came in on a single day on Friday. 300 of them avoided any apprehension. The rest were allowed in, apparently not inspected because there was no manpower, and then when they did check later, 4 of the members were members of MS-13, which is the street gang that is represented all throughout the United States, including in the New York area, and is known for brutal, barbaric murders like chopping heads off in order to make the point, and also fueled by the fentanyl crisis. So, answer, drug crisis getting worse, not getting solved. So now let's see if this is a pattern or not. And we'll move through this quickly so we can get to the conclusion. Is there a pattern? So we know the border is not our only crisis. We remember Afghanistan, correctly? We remember Afghanistan, correct? Afghanistan. We withdrew. Biden put off the date of Trump's withdrawal, even though he said it was Trump's fault that Trump set the policy, but he changed it. He put off the withdrawal and ignored the conditions. And then when he tried to orchestrate the withdrawal for a September 11th political stunt, it turned out that he got a lot of bad intelligence, maybe intelligence he was seeking to get, that they'd be able to hold on to the government for a long time, for at least a year. And he did something that is inexcusable and unexplainable, which is he took out the troops before the civilians. So when the civilians had to be taken out, there was mass violence, 130 Afghans at least killed, and of course 13 brave members of our military. That'll never be forgotten. This will never be forgotten. It's rare that a president of the United States directly causes the death of American military. Directly, clearly. But for that incompetent decision of taking the military out before the civilians, these young men and women be alive. That's the price that we have already paid for electing this man who is clearly impaired, dishonest, and incompetent. Afghanistan, of course, gets worse because we not only turned it over, we turned over the Bagram air base for reasons totally unexplainable, since it's separately valuable to us because it's only 400 miles from China. And as you will see, part of the things that are getting worse is his dealing with China. This is part of it. He gave away an air base that is strategically of enormous importance, 400 miles from China, 500 miles from Iran. No sane American president, or no American president considering the best interests of the United States, would give it away. Only a president who doesn't know what he's doing, surrounded by people who don't know what he's doing, or a president that wanted to help China would do that. And what's happening in Afghanistan now? According to his head of his Joint Chiefs of Staff and several other of his intelligence officials, the terrorist groups left behind there are now rather furiously planning to get themselves ready for attacks on Americans. This is where the attack of September 11 came from. And his decision on what he should do for the September 11 memorial was to put them back in power. He has, and even his administration now is saying, there's a very good chance that within a year they'll be ready to attack. So that problem has gotten worse. His own mental deterioration, watch him. He went to his most important priority, the stupid, idiotic, foppy conference in Glasgow with some of the silliest people in the world who are going to destroy us. In fact, all of them shouldn't even be there. According to all of them, we would have been destroyed by 2010, according to Gore, 2020, according to Prince Charles. Kerry actually believes we're already destroyed. I mean, these are some of the silliest people in the world who want to deal with climate change, but they don't want to deal with China and India, or with the realities of the fact that maybe the best way to deal with climate change is, yes, reduce pollution, but then put the rest of the money into adapting yourself and become wealthier, because wealthier societies deal with climate changes in seamless ways. But the way they're doing it, Gore becomes a billionaire. The rest of them become billionaires. I mean, they got it all lined up. Oh, and by the way, this enormously important conference, which may destroy America in 12 years, he falls asleep. I mean, this follows some ridiculous rumors about Rome and London and Camilla Parker Bowles going around gossiping that the president has a funny odor and he's not deteriorating. Watch him. Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code RUDY for these great specials. That's mypillow.com and use the promo code RUDY. Bidensville we mentioned, right? Inflation. Inflation, here's the pattern with inflation. And this is a pattern for almost all of these. The problem doesn't exist. That's how we begin. Back in April, he's got them all, including Powell, saying, transitory, pandemic, transitory, don't worry. I don't know, I got the statistics here. It says this is the largest increase in inflation in a 6-month period. That's not transitory, in 40 years. Even Powell, right here, Powell, who was agreeing with him, this was a couple of days ago, Powell signals heightened inflation risk. Inflation is the mother of big political change. The overpriced miseries of apple picking. Oh, we don't want to go through all the different things that have gone up. Just go to the gas tank every time you do and say to yourself, if you didn't vote for him, make sure you don't vote for him or a Democrat next time. And if you did, make sure you organize and don't vote for him again. Now, things have gone up, bare minimum 12%, maximum over 100%. And gasoline is going through the roof. We'll focus on that at the very end. National security, we are so much more in danger now than we were before. Just the explanation of what's going on at the border has to tell you that. What he did in Afghanistan has to tell you that. He took away an air base that was the closest one, I believe, to our major competitor and a country that's becoming increasingly militaristic, who has built a bigger navy than ours and who is constantly threatening us. And he appears to be unable to handle a crisis, which emboldens even some of the more irrational enemies. And here I'm not talking about Xi and Putin. They're enemies, and they're very dangerous. And they'll take advantage of a mentally incompetent leader of a country like Biden. But the more insane ones, like the Ayatollah, who knows what ideas this will give them. And they're on their way to becoming a nuclear power, aided by the cash given to them by Obama. And then when you look at the performance of his military, Miley, and the people, and Lloyd Austin, whose name he can never remember. I mean, they're teaching him about critical race theory, gender sensitivity. I don't know, how do you have time to learn how to fight a war when you got to memorize 58 different genders? I would fail. I mean, you think they're teaching him the 58 different genders at West Point? It would be a lot better if they taught him shooting, supply chain. I hope every one of these so far, they put their hands on and they've made it worse. Each one of them has displayed one after another incompetent idiot in addition to Biden working for him. You know, the border, Mayorkas, he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Afghanistan, Miley, who said Bagram is not strategically valuable, even though it's 400 miles from China. He obviously doesn't think China's an enemy. Deterioration? Well, they're all lying to us because they all spend time with him privately, and I know he's failing privately. You know that. You know what he has. I know what he has. This, like the whole administration, maybe it's a metaphor for it. This only gets worse. Want to follow the science? Let's follow the science. Let's follow the DSM-5. This is progressively worse, and then you don't know who you are. That's where it's going. We don't know when, but that's where it's going. Nothing is going to stop that. Whole administration, Bidensville, inflation, all predictions are it's going to be worse next year than this year. National security, we're virtually undefended. We're training our soldiers to memorize genders, not the most modern warfare. Supply chain, we may not have a Christmas. Or we may. Oh, and by the way, it's too complicated for us to understand it. No, it's not. I don't have the time. Maybe next time I'll draw it for you on the board out of my memory, okay? It's too complicated when you only have half a brain to understand it and no will to help the United States. And you're surrounded by people who have their own sinister agendas. And gas and energy. What's the other thing he did on the first day? You remember? He canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. He put 30,000 people out of work. He double-crossed the Canadian government. He rendered us, with that and his other restrictions on oil and gas and fracking, he rendered us energy dependent again after Trump and others had worked so hard to make us energy independent. If that isn't imperiling our national security, the only thing worse than that is giving the Bagram Air Force Base back to Afghanistan, and now there's even rumors China will take it. I conclude with, what's the answer other than we got to get him out of office? I don't mean now, we can't. Unless it happens and he walks out one day and he can't even start a sentence, much less finish it. That could happen, by the way, in which case he'll have to be removed and will be subjected to the even more unpopular Ms. Harris. There is one practical thing he could do that could help. He could hire somebody who could run things. Ronald Reagan, or actually Mrs. Reagan, did this at the latter part of the Reagan administration when things got pretty bad over Iran-Contra and people fighting in the administration. And she brought in the very, very skilled Howard Baker, who's, I think, one of his greatest contributions, among many, by the way, including Watergate, to our country, a great patriot, was to guide the last year and a half of the Reagan administration to a glorious exit. But in the interest of my country, could we find maybe a solid, responsible Democrat? There are those, don't be sarcastic, there are many, in fact. As I've told you many times, there are many great Democrats. This could happen to us, so don't get overly wild about this. It may even happen to us in our history. The Democrat Party is rotting from the top. It started with Bill Clinton, it continued with Barack Obama, and now it's a disaster. So, one of you guys who can talk to somebody, don't tell them it came from, tell them I'm against this. Go get a good, solid Democrat. Practical, let them run things, and just get our country through until we can get a majority in the House and Senate in 22 and really block them, and then get a good president in 24. It's like New York with de Blasio. It's got to get better. It can't get worse. We just got to get to 24 and not have something even more tragic happen. God bless you, and we'll be back with Rudy's Common Sense very shortly.